The modern road cyclist is a wannabe contortionist. Based on the way that we like our bikes to look, usually with long, low positions, it's given rise to a very common symptom when riding a bike: neck pain. There is a legacy element to handlebar width. If you consider the stat that a 52 centimeter, 54, 56 centimeter bike typically comes equipped with a 42 centimeter handlebar, most men that we measure across the acromion process, which is the landmark we use to somewhat dictate handlebar width, measure between 39 and 41 centimeters, rendering a 42 too wide for most people. And what happens when the bar is too wide, usually what riders will do is roll their wrist, and it results in this kind of associated neck and shoulder tension. As a result, an ability to look ahead is diminished, and cue neck pain. Other things to be aware of are, well, as I say, rolling of the wrist and an inability to reach the brake levers. You might also experience elbow pain, shoulder pain, and even sort of upper back pain as well. As I touched on earlier, based on the way we like our bikes to look, predominantly with like long stems and no spacers, excessive reach has become a very common driving factor for neck pain. Again, because of the associated neck and shoulder tension that comes with being overextended on the bike, looking ahead becomes a lot more difficult. Therefore, again, it can cause you neck pain. Human beings are extremely good at absorbing dysfunction and compensating. The point of saying this is that if your bike feels a little bit too long, it's way too long. On the grounds that, with regards to reach, you will absorb to the point that if it feels too long, you're way beyond the threshold at which you can function. So if you're having neck pain, have a go at maybe knocking the reach down. That 130mm stem is only going to cause you more problems. Something else to take into consideration is rider morphology, and in particular spinal posture. So, if you have an individual that possesses a thoracic kyphosis, which is relatively common, particularly in people who drive desks for a living, it refers to a rounding of the thoracic spine. Chris here does not have a thoracic kyphosis. But when you possess a thoracic kyphosis, it typically predisposes the rider to having difficulty looking ahead. Furthermore, it tends to result in the need for greater flexion of the cervical spine, so through the neck, and cue neck pain. The remedy for this, for the riders out there with thoracic kyphosis, is you can fix it, but I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not going to get you into that. Have a look at Googling fixed thoracic kyphosis. Alternatively, from a Bikefit standpoint, working on the assumption that people very often do not like to fix themselves, they like to fix the bike. Generally speaking, you'll need to have the handlebars higher and closer to you, on the grounds that the rider's torso is slightly shorter as a result of the additional curvature associated with it. Saddle tilt. So, you want to get a saddle more or less level across the two highest points. Now, I know this is a sweeping statement, but there are problems associated with excessive tilt in either direction. So if you've got too much saddle tilt with the nose down, we have the idiots of British cycling to thank for this. This is usually carried out by cyclists as a means of alleviating genital problems. The problem with it, though, is it creates a slope. And what happens when you put something on a slope? It rolls down the slope. What this usually results in is A, an over-interaction with the nose of the saddle, and B, way too much weight on the front of the bike, again, creating all of this associated neck and shoulder tension and an inability to look ahead. So, cue neck problems. Furthermore, if you have the saddle tilted nose up, this is less common, but we do still see it, mostly as a means of stopping the rider falling off the front of the saddle, and they use the nose to brace themselves to stop them falling into the front of the bike. That's usually driven by the saddle being too high, the reach being too long, the drop being too great, blah, blah, blah. However, if you do have the nose of the saddle pointed up, what it will usually result in is posterior rotation of the pelvis. In English, you kind of, because the nose is over interacting with soft tissue, what will typically happen is, it's human nature to get away from that, is for a rider to roll their pelvis away. what that typically results in is an overextension of the lumbar spine and a shortening of the torso. That in turn means that there's a greater difficulty looking ahead, loads of associated neck and shoulder tension, and, you guessed it, neck pain. Excessive handlebar drop. So, a few years ago, bicycles took seemingly a radical backward step with regards to the design and how well suited they were to consumers. Most bicycles these days are designed around the needs and limitations of a racing cyclist, 20-year-old 60-kilo athlete who can put out hundreds and hundreds of watts all day long, has professional sports massage after every ride, and is paid to ride a bicycle as quickly as humanly possible. The vast majority of us don't need to do that, and secondly, are not as well adept at riding a bike. Therefore, when you ride a really aggressive racing bike with excessive handlebar drop, most people don't necessarily possess the ability to rotate their pelvis in the way that is required to ride a bike like this. Furthermore, they're carrying more upper body mass, and as a result, it can result in an inability to look ahead. Again, cue neck and shoulder issues. You may be starting to see a bit of a trend here that these neck and shoulder issues are mostly associated with either excessive weight through the front of the bike, which can be driven by 1,000,001 factors, including but not limited to crank length, saddle height, saddle setback, reach, drop, bar width, all of this kind of stuff, or also a rider's postural needs. So all the more reason here to have your position analysed by a professional who knows what they're doing. So there you have it. There's a few reasons why you might get neck pain. If you think I've missed something, don't forget to drop a comment in the comment section below. If you'd like to book a bike fit with us, you can also do that through the links in the description. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next one.